Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought a secluded mountain retreat, I thought I'd found peace. No neighbors, no sirens, just silence and sky. Then came the letter. The HOA, from which I was legally excluded, wanted keys to my pool. That was the first shot. What followed? A war they never saw coming. When I first bought the property, I thought I was buying peace, solitude. A clean break from everything that had burned me out, figuratively and literally. The house sat in a private mountain valley at over 7,200 feet, nestled between towering evergreens, with a private pond on one end and a pool built right into the natural rock shelf on the other. 4 acres of fenced land, a private bridge, no visible neighbors, and, most importantly, not a damn thing to do with a homeowners association. That detail was not an accident. The developer who sold me the property practically bragged about the lot being officially carved out of the nearby HOA, some community called Aspen Echo Ridge. Apparently, there had been bad blood during the planning phase. Zoning fights, power grabs, usual HOA nonsense. He had insisted on recording the exclusion with the county just to make sure no one could contest it later. "You're off-grid, off-books, off-limits," he told me, slapping the deed with a big, satisfied grin. It was exactly what I wanted. After 15 years with Denver Fire, after a spinal injury that left me with a permanent ache and more titanium than a hiking pole, I didn't want block parties or newsletters. I wanted air I could breathe without a gas mask. I wanted water without chlorine and silence without sirens. That place gave me all of it, until the letter came. It arrived in a pristine white envelope with a deep green embossed logo on the front. Aspen Echo Ridge Homeowners Association. At first, I assumed it was junk, some misdirected spam, or maybe a passive-aggressive welcome note. But then I opened it, and I felt my stomach drop. The wording was polite, if you didn't know what passive aggression smelled like. They were requesting that I provide a regularized schedule for use of the community pool to avoid conflicting interests, and that I submit a duplicate key to the facilities to our Community Safety Committee for standard oversight purposes. Community pool, key access, oversight. I read the letter 3 times before laughing out loud, one of those laughs that curdles into disbelief halfway through. My pool, on my land, a community of one. I don't lose my temper easily anymore. But this scraped something raw. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table overlooking the water, and pulled out every document I had. The deed. The recorded plat map. The exclusion agreement signed and notarized by the developer, the HOA board, including one Karen Tremaine, then vice chairperson, and the county land office. Then I wrote my reply. I kept it civil. Barely. I reminded them point by point that my property was not now, nor had it ever been, subject to their governance. I attached the legal documents. I clarified that there was no community pool on or adjacent to their jurisdiction. I concluded by stating that any attempt to enter or access my property, by foot, key, or proxy, would be considered trespassing and would be treated as such. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested, and copied the county clerk for good measure. A few hours later, I drove down to town for groceries and supplies. When I got back, my neighbor Greg was waiting on my porch with a 6-pack and his usual scowl of concern. Greg's a retired Navy doc, tough as nails, dry as granite, and about as fond of bureaucrats as I am of migraines. He'd heard from someone in town that the HOA had been asking questions about the new guy up in the ridge. "They sniffing around your pool now?" he asked, cracking open a beer. "Worse. They want a key." Greg let out a whistle. "You piss off Karen Tremaine yet?" "Not intentionally," he laughed. "Buddy, Karen don't need intention. She only needs a clipboard and a grudge." I wasn't worried. Not yet. Annoyed, definitely. But I'd done my due diligence. My property was rock solid. HOA had no claim. If this was just a power play from some overzealous paper tyrant, it would pass. But Greg wasn't laughing anymore. "You think she's gonna let it go just because you sent a letter?" he said. "This ain't her first rodeo. She doesn't retreat. She escalates." Always I wanted to believe it was paranoia. But then I remembered the HOA's language, how they used historically shared resource, how they'd worded their request like it was already policy. That wasn't just a mistake. That was posturing. Still, it was just a letter, a line in the sand. At the time, I had no idea how many lines they were about to cross. I didn't hear from them again for a few days, which was almost disappointing. I'd half expected a letter bomb, or at least another certified envelope full of HOA jargon trying to convince me that their legal fiction was somehow binding. But no. Silence. It made me suspicious. On the fourth day, I drove into town to pick up a new shipment of pool cleaning supplies and a weatherproof mount for the motion-activated cameras I'd been meaning to install. It was a nice drive, crisp air, golden leaves, not a single HOA rulebook in sight. Took my time, even stopped by the diner for some chili and bad coffee. I should have gone straight home. When I pulled up to the gate around dusk, something felt off. The padlock on the service gate hung loose, sliced clean through like someone had taken bolt cutters to it. I parked the truck and walked the fence line, heart already picking up pace. The grass was trampled. Footprints led down the gravel path to the pool, and there were towels. 3 of them, one draped over a lounge chair, another crumpled near the edge of the water, plastic water bottles, a half-eaten granola bar, some kind of pink foam pool noodle left floating. Someone had been here, not just sneaking around. They'd made themselves comfortable. I checked the shed. Nothing missing. No broken glass, just intrusion. Audacious, entitled, smug intrusion. I stormed back up to the main gate and found the second letter in the mailbox. No envelope this time, just a single sheet of HOA letterhead paper folded in half. Printed in that same passive-aggressive legalese. Until such time as an equitable agreement is reached regarding management of the pool area, the HOA has temporarily assigned rotating volunteers to monitor the space for safety and community. Compliance. Please be advised that unsupervised or unregulated use of shared aquatic features may result in disciplinary review. We strongly urge you to open communication channels in good faith. Respectfully, Aspen Echo Ridge HOA monitor the space. Volunteers, disciplinary review, they'd broken onto my land, used my pool, eaten snacks, left trash, and now they were calling it monitoring. I called the sheriff's department immediately, gave them a calm but very pointed rundown of what I'd found and what I suspected. To their credit, they didn't treat it like some neighborly spat. A deputy came out that night, took photos, collected the letter, and filed it under criminal trespass. I'll be honest, he said. It's not the first time we've heard complaints about that HOA trying to flex muscle off the books. But cutting your lock? That's another level, he advised, installing cameras and stronger locks. I told him I was already halfway there. Next morning, I was on a mission. New reinforced padlocks, metal-bolted hasps, a secondary internal deadbolt on the side gate. I even welded a crossbar to the service entry for good measure. If they wanted to volunteer again, they'd need a battering ram. I mounted 2 cameras, one on the pole overlooking the trail from the fence to the pool, and another angled directly at the service gate. Motion triggered, night vision, cloud backups. Greg showed up just as I was bolting in the last anchor. They came in, he asked, brows raised. They came in. Swam, ate, left a damn pool noodle like it was their summer cabin. He muttered something about these people and passed me a coffee. We sat in the shade of the porch for a while, watching the trees bend in the wind. It would have been peaceful if I wasn't one HOA away from stringing up barbed wire. I hope you've got a paper trail, Greg said. I've got a trail, a report, 2 signed letters, and the world's pettiest pool party on camera next time they try. He chuckled, but his eyes stayed sharp. You might think this was their last warning. You'd be wrong. He was right, of course. That evening, I saw 2 unfamiliar SUVs slow roll past the edge of the tree line near the bridge. They didn't stop, didn't pull in, just lingered long enough for me to step outside and let them know I was watching. I installed 2 more cameras after that. A week ago, this place was peace. Now it felt like a siege waiting to start. The letter from the HOA should have been the high water mark of their insanity. Trespassing onto private property and leaving some backhanded justification. That felt like rock bottom. But with these people, rock bottom was just another foundation for new construction. 3 days after the pool incident, I got a call from someone named Monica Lopez, County Inspector, Environmental and Sanitary Division. Her tone was polite, but there was that bureaucratic edge to her words, like she was already checking boxes in her head. Mr. Wakefield, she said, we received a complaint regarding the status of your pool, possible code non-compliance and boundary issues. I'll need to perform an on-site inspection within 72 hours. My first instinct was to laugh. The second was to throw my phone at the wall. Instead, I asked for a copy of the complaint. She said it would be forwarded after her preliminary visit. Standard procedure. She mentioned something about shared-use water structures and disputed property designations. The last phrase stopped me cold. When she arrived 2 days later, I greeted her at the gate with every document I had, laminated, tabbed, highlighted. Greg stood beside me like a grizzled guard dog, arms crossed, not saying a word. Lopez was young, polite, clearly not thrilled to be dragged up the mountain over what smelled like HOA nonsense. But she had a job to do, and she wasn't about to be swayed by my indignation alone. I've been told the pool falls within a historical mixed-use boundary, possibly subject to community access guidelines, she said, scanning the perimeter with a tablet in hand. I handed her the official plat map first. This was recorded with the county 4 years ago. The land was legally subdivided and withdrawn from HOA governance. Here's the exclusion agreement, signed by the county recorder and the HOA board chair. Karen Tremaine, by the way. She raised an eyebrow at the name but didn't comment. Lopez proceeded to take photos, measure setbacks, check the pump shed. I watched her check her GPS against a printout. I caught a glimpse of it, an outdated survey map with blurred lines and, crucially, no annotation of the legal boundary revision. I recognized that map. It was from before the development was finalized. "Where did you get that map?" I asked. "It came with the complaint packet." I didn't need to guess who filed it. Karen goddamn Tremaine, pulling a page from the last decade and hoping no one noticed it was out of date. I calmly explained that the map was obsolete, legally superseded, and deliberately misleading if used without context. I showed Lopez the updated county GIS data, the filed lot split, and a letter from the planning office confirming the legal property line. She listened, she nodded, and by the time she left, she seemed irritated. Not at me, at being dragged into something so obviously contrived. Still, she had to file her report. If there's any question of ownership, she warned, the matter could be escalated to the zoning board or reviewed by a judge. "Just be prepared, I said. I'm halfway to having my own courtroom sketch artist. That night, I called my realtor and the developer I'd bought the land from. They remembered the situation clearly. I asked for anything they had on file. Emails, memos, planning notes, minutes from the original HOA meetings. I wanted ammunition. The next morning, Greg showed up with a manila folder thick with copies. "I took the liberty," he said. Don't ask how. Inside were 2 documents that changed everything. The first was a scanned copy of an internal HOA meeting transcript from 5 years ago. Karen had objected to the land exclusion. Not because she thought the pool was community property, but because she knew it wasn't, and she didn't want to lose access. The wording was brutal. If we let that parcel go, we lose any leverage over the pond and the pool. That's usable space. That's value. The second document was a certified letter from the County Planning Commission confirming the official land boundary, not just zoning, jurisdictional authority. HOA had none. With that, I drafted my next move, a formal complaint to the county prosecutor's office. I attached every document, letter, photo, and the latest inspector visit. Greg helped me format the entire thing like a legal report. I may not have worn a badge anymore, but I damn sure knew how to build a case. I signed it, scanned it, and sent it off. No more warnings, no more certified letters. If Karen wanted a fight, she'd just stepped into one. I was starting to get used to the quiet again. For a few days, the HOA stayed radio silent. No letters, no SUVs creeping past the tree line, no inspectors with half-baked complaints. It was almost disappointing, like waiting for the next punch that never came. But Greg kept reminding me, quiet was never peace. With people like Karen, quiet was planning. It was a Friday night when the alarm went off. The motion-triggered floodlight near the pool lit up like a stadium, followed by the high-pitched bark of the new siren I'd mounted just 3 days earlier. I was halfway into my boots before I even realized I was moving. Grabbed the flashlight with one hand and my phone with the other. Greg, who'd stayed over that night after some beers and barbecue, was already coming down the hallway behind me, groggy but alert. We exited through the front, moving slow, careful. I'd seen bears before. I wasn't eager to surprise one in the dark. But it wasn't a bear. 3 silhouettes stood near the pool. Teenagers. One tall, lanky kid with a hoodie half draped over his head. Another sitting on the edge of the pool with his feet in the water. The third, holding a garbage bag and trying to look like he belonged. The moment they saw us, one of them shouted, "Hey man, we're just here for maintenance." I blinked. Maintenance? The one with the garbage bag held it up like a peace offering. "We're volunteers. Pool hygiene team. From the HOA. I was stunned for half a second. And then I saw it, clutched in the tall one's hand, a printed sheet of paper with the HOA logo and some typewritten garbage at the top. Under the porch light, I could just make out the header, "Authorization for Community Youth Oversight Volunteers." "Put the paper down," I said, stepping forward. "And back away from the pool." Lanky kid smirked. "We've got authorization." "You're trespassing." "You broke onto private property in the middle of the night. We've got a right to inspect the water quality," he said. That's when Greg stepped forward. "No, son. You've got the right to shut the hell up and wait for the sheriff." Lanky turned, snarling something under his breath, and grabbed a folding pool chair. For a moment, I thought he'd just throw it on the ground. Instead, he flung it, right at me. Instinct kicked in. I ducked, and the chair crashed into the gravel behind me with a clang. Greg lunged, grabbing the kid by the hoodie and pinning him like he'd done this 100 times before. Probably had. The other two ran, scattering down the trail like frightened raccoons. I called 911. Calm voice. Clear description. Trespassing, minor assault, possible underage activity encouraged by HOA leadership. When the deputies arrived, Greg handed over the wriggling kid like a parcel. I showed them the printout. Sure enough, it was signed, Karen Tremaine, HOA president. Authorization granted for temporary access to community amenities for the purpose of youth volunteer supervision and site cleanliness enforcement. That was the exact phrase. The deputy read it, his jaw twitching. "We'll take this back to the station," he said. "This is highly irregular." "You want the security footage?" I asked. He looked at me like I'd just offered him a winning lottery ticket. "Absolutely." The kid, probably 16, 17, was booked for trespassing and assault. His name didn't mean anything to me, but Greg muttered later that he was the son of one of Karen's close friends on the HOA board. We made a full report, submitted the video files, included timestamps, visual IDs, and a nice little timeline of how long they were on my land before I intervened. Greg helped me draft a new legal packet, not a complaint this time, a civil pre-filing, a shot across the bow, documenting the pattern, letters, illegal entry, attempted manipulation via maps, and now using minors to access private property under false authority. I couldn't prove Karen ordered them to break in at night, but her signature was on that paper, and the intent was clear. Greg was quiet for a while after the deputies left. He finally said, "I've seen some nasty people in my time, but this is ego weaponized, and she's escalating." I didn't respond. I just looked at the pool. The water rippled gently under the lights, perfect and still, like it hadn't just been the center of a goddamn territorial war. I went inside, pulled out my notes, and started drafting something new. A case file, formal and clinical with numbered exhibits, because this wasn't just some HOA drama anymore. It was evidence. The morning after the night patrol incident, I woke up expecting silence. I was wrong. There were voices, 2 of them, just past the gate. I pulled on a flannel shirt, still barefoot, and stepped out onto the porch with a mug of coffee in hand and my phone recording in the other. Old habit. Always record first. A man and a woman stood by the outer fence, both in polos, with the Aspen Echo Ridge HOA logo stitched neatly over the chest. They weren't even pretending anymore. "Good morning, mister." "Wakefield," the woman said, waving like we were old friends. "Just conducting a safety review." "Nothing invasive." "You're on private property," I replied, calmly. "Step back." "We're technically on easement land," the man said. "No, you're not. That easement was revoked when the subdivision was legally restructured 4 years ago. The county filed it. I have the documents. You're trespassing." They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just smiled, turned, and walked back toward a navy blue SUV parked at the edge of the trees. No plates on the front. I didn't like it. Something was off. By noon, I was back from town with replacement locks, fresh trail cameras, and an idea. Greg helped me place a new camera facing the bridge, something with a long-range lens and clear visibility down the path. The system now had 6 cameras feeding into a dedicated SSD, plus automatic cloud backups every 12 hours. Let them try me again. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, I was walking the edge of the fence line when I caught something glinting under the bushes, just off the main trail, about 20 feet from the pool fence. I crouched, brushed away the leaves, and found it. A small rectangular plastic sign, warped slightly from being outside. On it, printed in bold navy font, Community Pool, Open Access, HOA Members Welcome. It looked old, but it wasn't. Still smelled faintly of plastic wrap. Too clean. Too new. Next to it lay an empty gallon jug labeled Pool Shock, High Concentrate Chlorine. 2 of them, actually. Torn labels. No barcodes. I froze. Someone was trying to make it look like I'd opened the pool to public access, and then either neglected it or dangerously maintained it. I snapped photos immediately, then picked up both the jugs and the sign with gloves. Tossed them in a heavy-duty evidence bag I kept in the garage from my firehouse days. Old habits again. Greg arrived 20 minutes later, took one look, and muttered, "Jesus Christ, they're setting you up. We have the trail cam," I said. "Oh, let's check it." The footage showed someone, hooded, small-framed, probably a woman, creeping down the trail at 3 a.m. She carried a duffel bag and crouched low. She placed the jugs near the fence and wedged the sign into the brush like it had been dropped. Then she turned and left, calm, methodical, precise. Frame by frame, Greg froze a moment where her face caught the infrared glint. He zoomed in. It wasn't a clear shot, but it was enough. "That's Marcy," Greg said, "Karen's secretary. The one who signs the meeting minutes. We didn't call the sheriff this time. We called the district attorney's office. I packaged the photos, the video stills, the objects, everything. Greg helped prepare a timeline. We formatted the file as if for courtroom submission, dates, chain of custody, annotations, GPS metadata. That afternoon, I submitted a new formal complaint. This time, it wasn't just about trespassing. This was attempted evidence planning, false implication, and coordinated harassment. The DA's assistant said she'd seen HOA harassment cases before, but never this orchestrated. "I'll flag this for priority review," she told me. "You'll want to follow up within 72 hours. We did more than follow up. Greg suggested getting the chlorine residue tested, just in case someone claimed it was old stock or mine. I dropped it off at a local lab in town used by the fire department for hazmat response. They logged it under anonymous submission, but the chain of evidence stayed clean. The results? That particular brand and packaging wasn't sold retail. It was commercial grade, HOA contractor supply. I barely slept that night. I wasn't scared. I was furious. This wasn't a property dispute anymore. It was character assassination. They wanted to make me look negligent, maybe even dangerous. Let the county revoke my occupancy. Let the insurance pull out. Force me to sell. They were trying to crush me by narrative. But stories work both ways, and I was building one they couldn't twist. By now, I was done playing defense. They'd broken into my land, used underage kids as pawns, manipulated maps, and now they were planting hazardous materials near my pool. Karen and her inner circle weren't just aggressive, they were strategic. And they were gambling on the idea that I'd stay silent while they controlled the narrative, so I decided to burn their script. Greg and I spent the next 48 hours turning my property into something between a press conference and a crime scene walkthrough. He brought over his old laptop and a portable projector, and I turned the barn into a briefing room. We printed everything. Every email, letter, screenshot, time-stamped photo, county record, zoning map, and piece of HOA correspondence. We even had side-by-side comparisons of the fake map versus the real one, the chemical containers next to their product catalog entries, the pool sign in my hand, and the HOA's own design template lifted from public records. Then we made it public. I posted on the town forum, on the neighborhood Facebook page, and even printed flyers. Open day of property documentation. Learn what the HOA doesn't want you to know. I expected 10 people. Maybe a couple of angry neighbors or curious old-timers. We got 53. Reporters from 2 local news outlets showed up. A lawyer from town. The owner of the local hardware store. 3 former HOA members who apparently had clashed with Karen over budget mismanagement last year. And a man named Carl who simply said, "I've had it with that woman." Let's see the circus. I didn't rant. I didn't go full YouTube conspiracy guy. I just laid it out. The timeline of events, the legal evidence, the security footage. Greg ran point on the technical side. He explained the camera metadata, the file hashes, the chlorine's lab analysis. Someone asked, "Are you pressing charges?" I answered, "I already have." Someone else muttered, "She's finally gone too far." After the presentation, people stuck around. A few shared stories, like how Karen once fined a neighbor for excessive wind chimes or tried to remove solar panels she called visually disruptive. One woman said she'd moved away from Aspen Echo Ridge entirely after being threatened with foreclosure over a late landscaping payment. Others weren't just angry, they were scared. Turns out several residents had been receiving veiled threats from the HOA board for speaking out. Things like sudden citations, maintenance audits, or emergency fees voted in by executive session. By sundown, a petition had started circulating, not just to remove Karen, but to force an external audit of the HOA's finances and practices. Someone pulled up a digital form. Others began signing right there on their phones. That night, Greg and I sat back with beers in hand, watching the footage of people leaving, faces lit by phone screens, hands still scrolling, sharing links, screenshots, proof. "You flipped the narrative," he said. "Now she's playing catch-up." "I'm not done," I said. "Not until the county slaps a red stamp on everything she's touched." The next morning, HOA released a public statement, a bland PDF posted to their site titled "Clarification Regarding Property Boundary Disputes." It claimed their actions were based on good faith concerns, denied any wrongdoing, and accused me of attempting to sow division and hostility within the community. It even included a line about digitally altered images. That was their play. Gaslighting? By noon, someone had leaked an internal HOA email thread. It showed Karen instructing the board to counter his narrative aggressively and call his qualifications into question. One of the board members had replied, "You do realize he used to run into burning buildings for a living, right? He doesn't scare easy." It went viral on the neighborhood forum. A few hours later, I got a phone call from a reporter with the Colorado Daily Register. She'd seen the footage. She'd read the documents. She wanted to do a full piece. "You've started something here, Mr. Wakefield," she said. "This isn't just a pool." "No," I said. "It's a boundary. And they keep trying to cross it." It took less than 10 days for the county to issue the hearing date. When I got the notification from the district court, I printed 3 copies and pinned one to the inside of my front door like a trophy. Greg read it out loud twice, slow and deliberate, like reading a recipe for justice. The suit named Karen Tremaine, the HOA of Aspen Echo Ridge, and unknown co-conspirators in connection with defamation, trespassing, harassment, evidence tampering, encouraging minors to commit criminal acts, and attempted interference with lawful property use. It felt heavy, but clean. Greg helped prep everything. His background as a forensic expert was gold. We formatted a submission packet so tight it practically squeaked. Timeline, metadata, audio files, lab reports, screenshots, HOA emails, signed affidavits from neighbors. He even printed out the HOA's own PDF statement and annotated every contradiction with a red pen, like a school teacher with a grudge. Karen didn't show up to the first pretrial meeting. Her lawyer, some slick type from Boulder with a perfect haircut and a permanent smirk, argued that the entire case was an exaggerated misunderstanding between a civic-minded board and an overly sensitive homeowner. The judge didn't buy it. She'd read the complaint. "I see signed orders, photographic evidence, and documentation of potentially criminal conduct," she said. "We are well past misunderstanding." It was like watching someone slap a mosquito with a gavel. Trial was set for the following month. When the day arrived, the courtroom was packed. HOA members sat on one side, heads low. A few reporters sat in back. Greg and I were up front. I wore my best suit, clean shave, shoes polished. If they wanted to paint me as unstable or aggressive, I was going to look like a damn army recruiter. Karen walked in late, sunglasses on indoors, tight smile, jaw locked. When her name was called, she didn't respond. Her lawyer nudged her. She muttered something and sat down. Opening statements were short. The prosecution laid out the scope: a campaign of harassment against a legal property owner, misuse of community funds, manipulation of public resources, and documented abuse of HOA authority. Karen's defense tried to reframe the entire narrative, that she believed the pool was communal, that the map discrepancies were unintentional, that the volunteer patrol was an overstep by enthusiastic youth, and that the chlorine jugs were probably from old maintenance stock. Then the exhibits started rolling. Greg's forensic presentation was a masterclass. He walked the jury through the metadata on the video files, explained how the cloud storage had immutable logging, cross-referenced it with physical timestamps and lighting angles. He even highlighted how the trail cameras recorded the exact minute the chlorine jugs were placed, and how Marcy, Karen's secretary, had walked in from HOA property and back. When they played the audio from Karen's own email thread, counter his narrative aggressively, the courtroom shifted. People murmured. One woman in the gallery shook her head and walked out. The most damning moment came when the prosecution showed the signed authorization for youth oversight memo. Karen's signature at the bottom, clearly legible, dated 3 days before the kids broke in at night. The defense scrambled. They tried to claim the document was misused, that Karen did not intend for it to be interpreted that way. Then they brought Karen to the stand. It was a disaster. She was cold, clipped, dismissive. Tried to minimize everything. We thought the pool was part of the original shared area. It was always ambiguous. He was uncooperative from the start. She rolled her eyes at one of the jurors. When the prosecution asked her why she continued actions against a property confirmed as independent by the county, she said, "Because I didn't believe it was final. The county makes mistakes." The prosecutor just blinked. "But you signed the exclusion agreement yourself." Silence. When cross-examination ended, she was red-faced and visibly shaking, but the moment that sealed it came as court was recessing. A local journalist approached Karen outside the courthouse, microphone out, polite question. "Mrs. Tremaine, do you have any regrets about how this was handled?" Karen snapped. She slapped the mic from his hand and barked, "You people are all parasites." A dozen phones were filming. She was arrested on the spot for misdemeanor assault. Inside the courtroom, the verdict landed fast. The HOA acted outside its legal authority. Karen Tremaine was personally liable for damages incurred due to harassment, defamation, and trespass, and punitive damages were applied for malicious intent. Total $310,000. They also recommended criminal investigation into financial misconduct for use of HOA funds to pay personal legal fees. Greg and I didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still cleanup to do. But when we got back to the property, I hung a fresh sign on the inside of the gate. "This land is lawyered, trespassers will be prosecuted, and publicly embarrassed." I didn't hear from Karen again. Well, technically I did. Her lawyer emailed a final settlement document, a neat little PDF with official apology language approved by the court, confirming she would never again contact me, speak publicly about me, or set foot within 100 yards of my property. The email came from a different associate with the subject line, "Per terms of judgment, no contact." Fitting, cold, clean, just like she tried to be. The week after the verdict, Aspen Echo Ridge looked like a house of cards in freefall. Karen had officially resigned, or more accurately, been pushed out 2 days after her courtroom meltdown. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves. 3 members resigned. A petition to dissolve the entire HOA got more than 60% support in under a week. That was enough to trigger a formal vote under Colorado's Common Interest Ownership Act. I wasn't part of their meetings, but word spread fast. Turns out Karen had authorized over $30,000 in HOA legal expenditures tied directly to her personal vendetta against me, without a vote, without disclosure, and in some cases, without the board even knowing. She'd used HOA funds to pay for the youth volunteers' apparel, legal research, sabotage, and a private investigator she'd hired to try and find code violations on my land. He never found any, because there weren't any. There was also a quietly submitted invoice for land recovery consulting. Nobody knew what that meant. I had a pretty good guess. When I drove into town the next Friday, I noticed a lot more for sale signs than usual. People were jumping ship. Others were organizing to reform the HOA from the ground up with a third-party mediator, community transparency rules, and a hard ceiling on legal spending without majority vote. I didn't join their meetings. I'd fought my war. But I did help in another way. Greg and I launched something we joked about for weeks. CLEAR, Citizens for Legal Equity and Accountability in Residential Governance. It started as a Substack post, then became a shared folder of legal templates, guides, motion samples, and annotated HOA bylaws with real-world commentary. Soon, it had over 500 subscribers. People from Colorado, Utah, Oregon, even Florida. One message stood out: "I just found your case. My HOA threatened to sue me for putting up a vegetable garden. I've been terrified to fight back, but after reading what you did, I think I'm ready." That hit different. I never wanted a fight. I just wanted a place to heal, to breathe, to be left the hell alone. But the more I dug, the more I realized that what happened here wasn't rare. It was just usually quiet, covered up, buried under bureaucracy and polite threats until people broke or gave up. Karen picked the wrong guy. 3 weeks after the judgment, I replaced the old pool gate sign with something new. Big, simple, carved into a cedar plank with dark stain letters. Private property, not for HOA use, not negotiable. Underneath it, a small brass plate mounted with 2 screws. Greg was right. He laughed when he saw it. Then he added his own line with a Sharpie. So was the camera. The mountain air felt cleaner after that. Not because it changed, but because I could finally breathe without watching my back. The pool's still mine. So is the land. So is the story.